As you watch the screen, your heart begins to beat faster. There's a fluttering in the pit of your stomach. Your throat is dry. Your palms damp. Suddenly a chill runs down your spine. You clutch the person next to you. You tell yourself, it's only a movie. It's only a movie. But sooner or later, it's time to go home.
Welcome to Film Strip. I'm Jay, and I'm excited to welcome to the show Gory Corey, teen horror blogger, co-host of the Screen Teens podcast, and Fangoria's teen correspondent. Corey, thanks so much for joining me in this episode of Film Strip.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. And we're here to review Starry Eyes, starring Alexandra Esso, Amanda Fuller, Noah Segan, Maria Olsen, and Louis Desserron. Written and directed by Kevin Kolsch and Dennis Widmer. Released in 2014 off a Kickstarter campaign. Marked critical acclaim. Movie has been cemented in modern horror pantheon for years. Corey, what's your background with Starry Eyes?
So I first saw Starry Eyes a couple years ago when I took a horror production course at USC from Dr. Rebecca McKendry, and she highly, highly recommended this film, and we watched it in her class. And then actually we were lucky enough to have the directors come in and talk to us about it and give us like a little Q&A, and it was just the coolest thing.
Oh, that's awesome. You actually heard it from the source. So you are the expert on this.
Literally, it was so cool. And I grew up acting as a kid, so I really felt like I knew what this movie was going for.
I can only imagine what that is like. I've talked to several of my friends who have done acting and things like that about this, particularly a few scenes of this, and we'll get into that as we get into it. But yeah, this one for me was one of those I ran across during a time when I was just finding like new horror on I think Prime. Had just a run of it before Shudder became a thing, and I think I ran into this and Hush and all this sort of run in the 2010s that I call it, of just really cool, smart horror. And I watched this, thought, oh man, this is really cool. This and like The Last Shift were sort of in the same evening or whatever.
Yeah.
Big fan of this, thought it was cool. Kept up with the directors. I actually liked the Scream TV show, even though I am way old to like that show, but whatever. I like the movies. So
the Scream TV show is one of my all-time favorite shows ever.
Because it's really smart and well done. So I got into that. So I was keeping up with these directors. They did the Pet Sematary remake, and we haven't reviewed that here on Film Strip. We did the original years ago, and I actually love that movie. And I liked the remake. The only thing I would say, and I don't think it's the director's fault, is that whoever made the trailer blew like the coolest part of that in the first 30 seconds. I'm like, no, you saved that, but whatever. We can talk about studio film problems all night, but Starry Eyes that really stuck in my head because not only the subject matter, but just the way it was done. And then the more I dug into it, and I'm curious to hear your perspective too, having heard from the directors that this was a script they had, and they literally put this together from groundswell funding.
Yeah, it's totally like the characters in the movie go along with this film and the making of it so well, because it's just a bunch of indie filmmakers that are like getting together and just doing stuff. And that's exactly what this was, which is really cool.
Now, that is really cool. And again, it's a cool story. So maybe for the uninitiated, I'll give a quick plot summary and we can get into this thing a little bit. Alexandra Esso plays Sarah, an aspiring actress struggling to make her way in Hollywood like so many. She works at a pseudo fast food joint in between auditions, acting classes, and continual rejection. She has a group of friends, some of whom are aspiring artists and indie filmmakers as well, and whom she keeps at a distance, though, while she seeks her path to fame and fortune. And after an audition for a role with Australis Pictures ends in another rejection. Sarah freaks out in the bathroom, even ripping her hair out. The casting director observes this and tells Sarah to do that for them in another audition. She eventually does and gets a call to meet with the producer of the film. And in a tale far too common in Tinseltown, he propositions her for sex while promising her a role and much more. She refuses, of course, and confides in her friends, who convince Sarah she made the right choice, and she's go on to work in their indie project with them after they get wild and have a good time. So during her drug-induced fervor or something, Sarah changes her mind and contacts the Australis folks again, asking for a second chance. She goes back to the producer, and while performing oral sex on him, he reveals pentagrams on his hands and tells her that if she's willing to destroy her old life and be born again, she can have all the things she dreams of, while a bunch of people from Eyes Wide Shut or standing around. I don't know. We'll talk about it. Afterwards, Sarah mentally and physically deteriorates, and we see this in front of us, and she reaches out to the folks again, begging for help, and they remind her of the condition. She must bury her old life, all of it, in order for the promise to be fulfilled. And she has a choice. She can either die or, fulfill her destiny. So Sarah goes on a brutal rampage and kills all of her friends. And the people behind Australis Pictures reveal themselves to be part of a demon worshiping cult, worshiping the demon named after the same production company. And they perform a ritual which causes her to basically give rebirth to herself in this really odd scene. And then she emerges from the ground the next day morning, flawless and healthy and no hair at all. She looks like the woman in the first Star Trek movie, V'ger. And she finds gifts from the cult, a dress, a nice necklace, and a big wig. And so she goes home to see her roommate and kills her last friend before taking time to admire her new form in the mirror as her eyes glow green and credits roll. And that's a straight line through this movie. There's a lot to talk about as we get into it. And you said you were an actress, a child actress, and thanks, Corey, you've done some of this stuff. And I think what's neat about this is they drop us right in on Sarah. We just get a sense of sort of her day-to-day life of going from working at the Chicken Shack kind of place to auditions and all that back and forth. And I want to ask you just your experience in auditions and things. What's that process like of just going before people, reading something and walking out of a room and having no idea like whether it worked or not?
It's the worst on the planet. Like, it is so miserable. Auditions are like so nerve-wracking, and you get zero information about usually you get no information about where you're going, what the audition's about, anything about the people. So like, you don't know who you're going to be with. And if you don't have if you don't have like an agent, like Sarah didn't have an agent, they could be like murderers that are just putting out, like, you don't know. You never know who these people are that are putting out casting calls. They could say they're Australis Pictures and not even necessarily be them. So it's a really scary process. I was lucky enough to never have any like bad experiences like she did, or have to be like a working actor, because I was a kid when I was acting. But no, it's not super fun. And a lot of times you feel like you give the performance of a lifetime to just get a like, we'll be in touch, Oh, God. So you just never really know.
Yeah, I mean, that's the part of
crazy.
It. That's the part of it I couldn't get over. And I talked to some friends that have done a lot of acting, mostly theater acting, and they said that the process is eerily similar. You go in, you read some lines, and they go, okay, thanks. And you have no idea, like, was that what you wanted? Did I give you a dog?
You just don't know.
And for what I do in the day
and it's
job,
like, can you give me a note? Can you tell me anything? Like,
yeah. That's part of that where Sarah does that in this. And I relate it so much to, my day job where people, interview for jobs and stuff like that. And they always ask, like, can you give me any feedback? And like, legally, no, like, I can't tell you to answer that better. Like it's not part of, it's not part of the culture. We don't, let you do that because there's so many reasons, and gosh, it would be useful, but again, there's reasons why we don't do that. And I think that's so neat though, is to get to see her operate. And what I want to, at least my impression of it, I want to get yours of, is that we're watching somebody who, like you said, doesn't have an agent. So clearly has just done a little bit things here and there. And we don't really get a lot about her backstory, but I kind of imagine Sarah being from like, the Midwest or something like that, and going out to Hollywood to seek her, her dreams, and where she came from. I can imagine like she was the biggest deal in town. Like she was in everything. People knew her. She was hometown famous. And she gets out there and she's just another face. And like, there's a lot of stuff you have to deal with when you're facing that. And you can almost see it. And Alex Esso has such a set of eyes that's so good that the movie's all about her eyes and stuff like that. But she performs with this just deep amount of pain and what am I doing? Oh, this is what I love, but it's killing me. All of that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you watch the movie and it's so frustrating because you're like, oh, she's such a good actress. She totally deserves to have this huge blockbuster role that will be a gateway into her career. And you're like, God, I want her to get it, but you don't want her obviously to do the bad things. So it's a struggle. And I think you can tell that this really comes from a place of struggling filmmakers that know what the industry is like and have experienced this kind of thing before. And it's just so heartbreaking to watch.
Yeah, I did read one little note that they said that a lot of this was very similar to the audition process that they had been a part of. And when they were auditioning people for stuff, they were like, we didn't really know what to tell people and we couldn't give anything. And people would just
get
walk
no
out
information.
The room. Yeah.
It's from both sides. Like it's just, it's a weird system and it's creepy. And they perfectly showcase that.
Yeah, I think that what one of them even said, like, you have to be a little bit psycho on both sides of this table to do this, because you walk in and you perform for the job and then you may find out nothing. You'll never know what it was that worked or didn't work, because the people often you're auditioning in front of, and even in indie productions and stuff, may not even be the people that you work with every day. It could be part of the finance team. It could be the production group. You have no idea. And, like casting directors I have a colleague who used to be a casting director, and I asked him, I said, hey, did you get like go on sets and stuff? He's like, dude, I never saw any of it. He said, I just cast the role and handed it off. And I thought, wow, how interestingly disconnected from all of this do people get?
It's crazy. It's just such a weird process. And there are so many different ways. It like depends on at each audition what to expect, and they're all so different. So it's a weird, terrifying process, and I think they capture that so well. And I'd never seen a film that did that so well before. Yeah, it really did nail that. And I will say it's neat to watch her go through her day to day, and we meet her friends and things like that. And then this audition comes up pretty early. Her friends are just the worst,
right? Like, well, some of them are. Like, I think Tracy's like a good friend.
Just that one girl, really. It was just so frustrating to watch, and you're like, God, it'd be so good if she got this role, and like she proved them all wrong.
Right. Well,
there's really want it for her. You can tell why she wants it so badly.
Yeah, I think in every group of friends of like, especially artists and things like that, there's always like a couple of naysayers that just think, yeah, y'all are not even good, And then there's the supportive ones who really don't know what else to tell you other than like, yeah, you can do it, go for you, And there's usually one person that's actually going to give you good feedback, and it's her director friend. It's Noah Sagan's character in this. This is an early role for him too, and he's been in all kinds of cool stuff. He's one of Ryan Johnson's like favorite people.
This, especially because it's so awesome to see all of the actors in this interact too, because so many of them went on to have such incredible careers within indie horror, and they all work on each other's films. It's the coolest thing. I really love the cast in this movie. It makes me so happy.
Yeah, it is neat. And I mean, I had friends that came up and did a lot of film and again, a lot of community theater and stuff like that. And then even when I was like in bands and stuff growing up and coming up, like we all played on each other's stuff and would write each other's stuff and trade like, hey man, what are you using on this and all this? I mean, there's something cool about that level of it, but there's also like this ultimate always competition. Like, I ain't gonna tell that guy how I'm setting up my amp because I don't want him to sound like me, and
well, especially in the movie, like when that one friend was like kept belittling the project, the Silver Scream, she's like, oh, what a stupid name and all that stuff. It was like, oh, it was so annoying.
I know, but I do think that there is this, and it still exists today, and for reasons that will baffle me until I'm gone from this earth, as to why people look down on horror movies as a bad thing. It's most people's gateway into anything. It's cheap to make. It's pretty simple what you have to pull off to do a good one, right? And look how many major stars have been broken by movies like this. And I mean, to top off the queen of all of them, who's still doing them, Jamie Lee Curtis, who never shied away from it and has had
one of the most talented actresses of our time.
Right. And has done so much stuff.
Never would have been found without Halloween.
No, right? I mean, she was doing lame TV commercials for JCPenney. So, I mean, even though she was Hollywood royalty, she couldn't get a kick. So, miss me with all that horror movies are cheap. Like, if you've got a friend that tells you that,
a little, nah. It's just rude. And it's like, not everyone also has millions of dollars to spend on a film. So gatekeeping the genre, like, is just crazy. But
that's why I'm so thankful for a service like Shudder and things like that. And even what Hulu's done to fund, and you know, Blumhouse has been notorious for this for years.
Definitely.
I shouldn't say but I mean, they funded a lot of stuff. So, I mean, you may not like the Paranormal Activity movies, but the money that they made a lot of stuff you do like. So, and that's how, I mean, and look,
and they also made so many filmmakers be able to be recognized and be able to actually work. And so it's like, whether or not you like the movie, it did so much for so many people. So.
Yeah, I got bad news for anybody that likes those Lord of the Rings movies. New Line Cinema ain't got no money to do that if Freddy doesn't exist. So, like, that's where that started. Like, they will tell you that.
It's all Wes.
Bob Shea will tell you that to this day. So, but I mean,
exactly.
That's the fun part of this, though, is getting to see that.
I'm going to use that. That's a good point.
But it is a peek behind the curtains on how these things get made and from the maker's point of view, right? And Sarah is really torn between these worlds. She wants mainstream success, but what's good for her is actually probably doing the indie thing and just staying with it. But it's not what she wants. Like, she's already given herself over to it. And that's what I find so neat about this is ultimately she's going to be asked the old eternal question, the Faustian deal, will you sell your soul for fame and fortune? And she already has. Like, that's the lesson of Faust, is that he had already made up his mind before the devil ever came in with a contract. And that's the same with her too, is they're just looking for the right person. But what is so neat about this is she does the audition and she's not necessarily bad. She just doesn't do anything for them. Like, they don't think like, she don't seem desperate enough. And then she goes and has that freak out in the bathroom, which is freaking amazing. Like, that is unreal.
Alex's performance in this movie rips her hair out is just insane.
Yeah.
And I think it showcases her frustration so perfectly. And you're like, God, you just want her to get this role. You want this for her so bad. And you understand why she's so upset. And I feel like you can really feel her pain.
Absolutely. I mean, you really do feel like she's literally to the point where she's going to tear her hair out, you know, because she can't deal with it anymore. It's like that line. There's an all-time low song I love called "Forget About It," and it's like, there's some days I think we're going to figure it out, and there's other days you make me want to tear my fucking hair out. And I'm like, that's exactly where she is at this point.
Totally.
Yeah. But what's neat, she opens the door up, and there's the casting director who, I don't know what Nazi war criminal film they found that woman from, because that's exactly what she looks like she is playing. Like, I'm not saying her as a person, like that character, because there are 3 people in that scene, Corey, and there's the directory person who's just there. There's the casting person, and there's Alex, and every one of them are in a different movie, and it is amazing.
Yeah. She's I don't know if you've ever seen All the Creatures Were Stirring, but she is in that movie and she is incredible, that actress. I just want her to be cast in every horror movie till the end of time. Like, she's so great.
But no, she's awesome in that. Maria Olsen's her name, and I don't know her from you mentioned that. I remember that now, but I hadn't seen her anything. But yes, she is like Nurse Ratched.
She's just so good at being like that terrifying.
That evil assistant principal you had, it's just, there's something about her.
Scary.
Yeah, that is just off-putting.
She's just so intimidating. She has such a weird vibe. It's perfect.
And then again, you have the guy there that looks like he's fronting a 30 Second to Mars cover band and who's doing the thing with that, and they're trying to get Alex to go for it. And what's funny is when she really does let herself go and she just freaks out and throws that fit on the floor and everything, and all they give her again is like, okay, thanks. I was like, geez, you brought me back in here, and that's what I do. So she really feels it for that, and you could just feel like she's just just so defeated from it. And that's what I like those. And I
Well,
give a lot of this. The movie really centers on Alex Esso's performance and how she just takes us on that emotional roller coaster. And it's really believable to follow her. And I don't know anything about her, but you kind of wonder, like, you had a little experience with this, go through some of this kind of stuff.
And when they did the Q&A, they said that she hadn't really been in anything previous to this, and they just kind of like found her. And she was so perfect for the role, and they just got really lucky. And I just think that is insane, because
wow,
looking at her performance, like, I can't wait for her to be an A-list star. Like, she has to be. She's so talented that I'm just waiting for her movie to come out.
Right. Like you just keep waiting for that next thing for her to come.
It's incredible that they were able to find her like that.
That's amazing that they just picked her out of a crowd.
Yeah.
Like that's the magic of Hollywood, though. And even on the indie scene, you find people that are just like, they just have a thing, and next thing you know, they're there's billboards somewhere or whatever. Hopefully not at the price that the character pays here, as we'll get into. So she gets hopefully
that's changing.
Yeah, please let it be. We'll get to the ultimate one, but the callback, the first callback, is the thing that gets me. And apparently, like, this is based on, again, experiences the directors had, not themselves putting on, but where they just walk in and they tell somebody, like, okay, we just need you to kind of strip down, like, take everything off, but just strip down. And then you get like this weird strobe lighty thing. And I want to ask you, like, what is the trance she goes in? Is that part of like all the mystical, what's hot that they got going on in this? Or are we just sort of seeing this from her eye point of view, where she is being seduced by the evil that is behind all this stuff?
I saw it as a bit of both. I saw it as part of it being like her just being able to let herself go and feel comfortable, and like tell herself that she got a call back, like she's perfect for this role, and like, look at her go, and the other part of it being like she's selling her soul and she doesn't even realize it at this point. Because I feel like the bargain or whatever started before the second callback.
Oh, I agree, because you can tell them the way she's talking to her friends about, like, I really hope I get it. Like, there's something about this I'm just drawn to, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's like I said earlier, the fable under Faust is that he had already decided to do it before there was ever a deal to do it. It was just waiting for the opportunity. And Sarah is at the point in her life evolution, whatever, where she's like, I will literally do anything, no matter what, to get where I want to go. I don't care what everybody else says. And she does, man. She goes through it. But again, I'll give these guys the credit here. And it's something so stylistic, and that can be really cheesy if it's in the hands of directors doing what they're doing. But they both do a great job of making that scene work. Cool. Yeah, it's very hypnotic.
And the little flashes of her with like the blood are so crazy, and it's so quick, and it just really just puts you off center. Like it's so bad, but it's gorgeous.
Yeah, I mean, I was like, these guys definitely grew up watching Friedkin's Exorcist, and like have seen every cut of that, known to exist, and have seen all those things in between, because that's what makes that so freaky, is all the intercut stuff. Like, you see it, but you don't, but it's there. It's
so just like disturbing.
Yeah. And I mean, that's one of the things, like, I will say about this movie in particular that makes it so fun to revisit, is you catch more every time you see it, because you know what's going to happen. You're not trying to absorb so much. So now you can catch all that, and it gets even more off-putting. Like, I watched this at home alone, and I'm old, and I'm sitting there going like, man, I'm literally looking around the corner right now in my house. Like, this is freaky. Like, this is really creeping me out.
Yeah.
It's definitely the kind of movie to put on in the dark. Like, that's the best part of this
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they bring her in.
So effective.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They bring her in to meet the producer. And I mean, I don't know who Louis Desseron is either, but please cast him as your evil henchman.
Amazing.
Person. This dude is awesome, because clearly he's like this ultra Satanist demon worshiper or whatever person, but he also just plays off the stereotypical sleazeball producer, the Weinstein, all the stuff we've heard, right? And that you knew existed anyway, but nobody talked about it. The quiet part out loud is what I call it.
But this was even before the Me Too movement. So they were really like
They were way in front of it. But I mean, the thing is, and you read all the accounts from people that have come forward since the Me Too movement, and more power to them to do so, because that should have been called out decades ago. Let's just say it. But they talk about this has been going on forever. This has been going. And
well, it's like you look at this movie because it was 2014, and you just think about how or how much of it was so prevalent and so very clearly something that everyone could recognize and be like, oh, we all know this story. So it's not like we didn't really know it was happening. That's the whole plot of this entire film is the Me Too movement, basically. And it's like, it's just really sad that, it took so long to get where it is, I guess.
Well, it is. And it's also like the twist of it is that, this is happening. But also, everything you've always heard in church is true, that Hollywood is run by Satanists. And this is how it works, and like that playing into that, though.
Exactly.
It's the funny part is like, oh,
it's
wow.
It's so great.
Yeah, like we were right. Like that's the scary part of it.
And it's like, okay.
Yeah, I mean, like that's what brings the horror to it, though. And that's what I'm saying. Like nothing we're talking about things that are horrific in real life, but there hasn't been any real horror yet in this horror film. Except that they're now making the quiet part out loud on two fronts at the same time in front of you. And what's neat is that you see Sarah's choice is that she is put off by this. Like she has said, I will do anything, but clearly she has a line, and good for her for having that line. She should have that, but she has said, nope, we're not doing that. And she runs and she goes back. And I want to ask you what it is you think finally changes her mind, because we got to talk about what happens. Like she quit her job because she got the call back because she was so sure she was going to get it. And now she's like, what am I going to do? I can't pay rent. I can't do anything. And her friends are giving her like, on one hand, they're giving her, a little bit of credit for it, but they're also like, great, now we got to drag her around for another month. Like they're not as sympathetic.
No, I think you especially see, I feel like Sarah is very isolated from her friends throughout this entire film, and she feels like a very different character as opposed to them, because they're out drinking every night and she's working. Like she's auditioning, she's working, she's doing her best to get where she can, and they're still in the same place. And she feels like she's not moving upwards, even though she's doing exactly what she's supposed to be doing. So I think this is also a really interesting take on like the society that we live in at the moment in America, and how we have this ideal of like the American dream and working super hard. And if you work hard, you'll get to where you want to be, when that's clearly not the case. And for a lot of people, it's not possible. So it's a really interesting take on that, I think. And I assume she just feels so fed up, and she's like, look, what's the difference between, working my entire life to do nothing and doing something awful to get where I want to be? I feel like that's sort of her breaking point of like, does she want to work at Taters forever? No. Yeah. Does she want to be a roommate with these friends that she doesn't like? Like she'll do anything.
Right. And I mean, she goes through this whole struggle, and you're exactly right. It is the age thing that you go through when you're at her age, when you're in your 20s and you're supposed to be adult and whatever the heck that means and all that stuff. And you're trying to figure out, what am I supposed to do, with this? And like I remember watching like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and like season 6 is kind of lousy as a Buffy season, but it's a really good metaphor for what it's like to be a young adult. Like it sucks because you're not really responsible enough to be responsible for anything, but you also don't know what you're supposed to do, but you're supposed to know. And it's this constant push and pull between all that stuff going on in your head. And there's nobody around you in the circle that you trust the most who can really advise you, because they're in the same boat you are. And that's the thing with Sarah is that her friends, some of them are better for her than others. Like I would say Tracy, the roommate, and the director, like they're probably on her side. The other people, like, like when one of them gets a nosebleed randomly and she kind of laughs at it, like I was with her. I'm like, yeah, she got to deserve that. So I mean, that's so horrible to you about everything. But in the movie's logic, what we're seeing is her seduction to the dark side, if you will, because she already went in kind of predisposed to, I'm open to this idea. And we've seen that in her trance and her visions and all this stuff. I mean, she sees what she might look like and all of these things. And it's when she's partying with everybody. I don't know if he gives her like ecstasy or something like that. And, they're all jumping in the hotel pool they live in, which I'm sure your neighbors really appreciate that. Thanks a lot. But whatever. They're out there doing all this stuff. And in that moment, she's like, you know what? Wait a minute. She finds clarity there, right? So she changes her mind and she makes that phone call and she just leaves a message. And like 20 seconds later, the phone rings, which I was like, wow, if only it was that fast, to turn around. Right. And they're like, be here in an hour. And when she goes back, like you hear the echoes again of what the producers laid on. She not only has he propositioned her, like, you got to have sex with me or whatever for you to get where you want. But what he has laid on her is that she can transform and she can become all these things. Like he's deep in this and she's taking all that as metaphor. When what I look at after you've watched the movie and the secret, I'm like, I kind of give the dude credit. Like he's telling you pretty much like, you're going to kill everybody, He
told her exactly what was going to happen.
Right. And then it happens. And that's what's amazing is, and again, is I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, that's kind of the neat part of evil though. And I think when evil is represented well in a movie, and evil gets lines to talk. It's not just a force moving around. Is when you boil it down. You're like, evil is not telling you anything that's not true. Because why would evil lie? There's nothing to gain in it. They just don't think you'll believe it.
Which like that almost. Again, I feel her frustration totally, and you can kind of see why she takes the steps that she does. Because like again, everything that she knows is like, you have to work hard to get where you are. You have to do this, this, and this. You have to work this job so you can pay the bills, but you have to be an actor on the side and you have to take acting classes and you can't party with your friends and you can't do anything. You have to work. And that's not getting her anywhere. So it almost feels like evil, the evil side, the cheating way kind of is like the way to go.
Right. I mean, that's what you hear. If you ever talk to any band that's ever done anything, and I kind of relate back to that because that was my world, is you think that what you do is you play gigs and you just party all the time. When reality is you work the two jobs you can to save up enough money to get gas in the van to go play a gig in the middle of nowhere, hoping somebody listens and buys your, mixtape or whatever. And you're just struggling through that and you work at it and work at it and work at it. And and it makes you good. I mean, that's why a lot of people get real disappointed when their favorite band like finally records that album. You've listened to them play for 10 years and then they do their second one. And because they did it in 2 years, they didn't have the same experience with it.
Yeah.
And exactly. They're like, well, I poured everything I had into the other one. I don't really know what to do. So the good ones figure that out, obviously, get the formula down, but it's why a sophomore slump is a real thing. Like that, it's hard to do something great twice because usually the thing that you're really passionate in, you pour so much into it. And then everything you do subsequently suffers from it. I mean, we talked about Jamie Lee Curtis earlier. Look at John Carpenter. I mean, the films that he did post-Halloween now have a reverential following, but he'll be the one to tell you like, where were all the
but they didn't at the time.
None of them worked at the time.
Exactly.
So he's like, thanks a lot. Of course, actually he'll take the check. He's happy to, but he talks about like, everybody expected me to just have that every time I did it. And worse, you even think about like Francis Ford Coppola, he made a couple of indie films and then he did The Godfather. And how do you top that? Like it's hard to come back and do that.
It's like, what are you supposed to do after those? Yeah.
Right.
No, just like, it's a really interesting way that this movie kind of forms how just tired she is. Like it's so you can tell how exhausting it is for her. She's worked so hard and she deserves this. And she deserves it, but you just don't necessarily want her to go to the dark side. But it's also kind of like, if she goes into this indie film, is she actually going to get the lead or is this other actress going to get the lead? And like, is he going to ever film this film? What's going to happen with that? Like, you don't know anything.
Right.
So it's a difficult line to walk.
Yeah, I mean, you see him making out with the other potential actress at one point that before she goes back to the producer again, and maybe that's what sets her off. She realizes that like, this is the more like true to myself way to stay with y'all or whatever. But honestly, like I don't care about this. I want to be the.
She doesn't want that.
Yeah, she wants to be the star, and there's nothing wrong with that. You know, you just have to accept it.
And it's like, well, she worked hard. She worked really hard for that. So you you want her to be, but it's just, she just can't do. And it feels like she has no other options, you know?
And that's why it's so sad to see her go through the lengths that she's going to go to get this part. The only thing that makes this scene remotely watchable, though, is the fact that this actor goes into his own little trance. And again, like I said, the extras from Eyes Wide Shut show up, and he starts rambling into this whole, like, the world will open before you and everything will fall. And he's repeating all this, you know, you must destroy everything. And I'm like, man, this guy is talking way too much for one thing during an intimate moment. Let's just say it. And secondly, like, this is insane. But once again, the devil doesn't try to hide what he is. He just does his thing. And that's what's neat. Again, watching it on rewatch, you're like, he is laying out what is about to happen for us the next act of this movie,
literally step by step.
Yeah, like you're going to see all of it.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, the steps that these people go through, and I got to give Colson Widmer credit. They didn't have money for effects. Like, they did very little stuff. Yeah. And SO2, because when she starts spitting maggots up, and that's real stuff and all of that. Oh my
God. It is so disgusting.
Yes.
It's her at the end too, when she's ripping out all her hair.
Yeah.
It's so gross.
It's right out of Cronenberg's
I don't know how they did that, but it was so well done.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, and I'm sitting there, and so I started talking to, again, I talked to some of my friends that have done things. I'm like, how do you do this stuff? And they're like, oh, you know, good skull cap, cheap wig, you tear that apart. Like, it actually will look good if you light it right. And it's the thing about indie movies that are usually what makes them look so cheap is nobody knows how to light anything. Unless you get people that know what they're doing with them. And these guys obviously knew what they were doing. Ad Brickner, the cinematographer, knew how to set it up, much like Carpenter had Dean Cundey, who's a legend in Hollywood and will go down as one of the greatest cinematographers ever. If you know somebody that knows how to set the camera up and light it right, it'll look good. And then it's on the performers. And when she, again, as she becomes this sort of deteriorating version of herself, Corey, it is unsettling, but I can't take my eyes
off. It's really hard to watch.
Yeah.
It's gross. But I'll say it's really fascinating to me because there are a lot of directors that have this one philosophy that you have to break an actor down into nothing, and you have to psychologically, like, torture them basically so that they become a blank slate that you can kind of create whatever character you want up off of them. And I think that's one of another thing I really love about this movie, that it points out that, because, you know, there are so many roles that have killed actors. Like, when you think about like the Joker and Heath Ledger and that kind of thing, like the amount of psychological distress that certain roles can cause and certain directors can cause, like Kubrick and Shelley, it's so unsettling and disgusting and horrific that I think this movie, I'm really glad this movie like called that out in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. Because there is that school of where I'm just going to, torture this person to get the performance I want out of them versus
which is not a form of directing.
No, it is
not.
That's
just being awful.
That's a form of being a horrible person. Yeah. People can go back and listen to our Kubrick retrospective. Kurt and I did all the Kubrick films through the years here. And we'll always talk about like the pains he put somebody through to get, and you would just wonder,
it's just not,
like, and you see the damage it did to so many people. And that's the thing, though, is you're seeing this, and to realize that there's this other side of it. I call it the Clint Eastwood, Harrison Ford dichotomy, where you just say, okay, go. And then Harrison Ford goes, let's play pretend for 2 hours. And you just do your thing. And then it works out great. Like, you don't have to live what you are to be. And I get method acting. I think that's neat. But the best method actors know how to walk out of it. And even Lee Strasberg would tell people.
And I think there's a very fine line between like method acting and going crazy.
Yes.
Because when you hear the stories of like Jared Leto sending, what was it, like rats to his co-stars and stuff, that is, again, taking it a little too far.
Yeah. Like you're
and I just think there are certain.
Yeah. There's
a lot of like care that needs to be done. I think there are boundaries. Like,
yeah, the best ones know how to handle it, know how to
Totally.
go there, and then pull back and pull each other back too. I mean, that's, you know, the actors that I know that, again, still do theater and work, they talk about doing these really deeply intense things, but they always have time afterward to joke about something, or, you know, talk about my cat or whatever, just to decompress all that stuff. I mean, you have to like drop all that heinous stuff from yourself, or else you'll be eat up with it. What is neat to watch here, though,
sure.
and back to this movie is, you know, again, there's the metaphorical part of it, but then there's actually what's just happening to Sarah and watching it, and now we're in the horror movie. Like, yes, this is what I came here for. This is insane, and her fingernails are falling out. I mean, it's everything you can think of.
Oh.
And she gets into that great argument with her roommate about, like, you know, hey, you know, you're going to have to eventually pull your weight around here, yada, yada. And I love when she turns back into her bedroom after slamming the door on her, there's just this stack of cash there, just magically.
Yeah.
And the way she just throws it at her, it was like, oh, this is
so good.
Yeah, it's so good, but it's also like when you realize, like, oh, she is so screwed. Like, she is not coming back from this because they are literally funding her demise. Yeah, and it's wild. And when she gets to the point, Corey, where she's writhing on the floor, she doesn't know what to do, and she calls them to go, what have I done? What can I do, or whatever? And the producer repeats that back to her, like, I told you, you have a choice. You can either die and be nothing, or you can be reborn, but you have to destroy your life in the process. And he just goes on that whole little sermonette again. And there's a look on her face.
And I love how she interprets it as the look on her face. It's crazy. And like, when I first watched this, I was like, oh, she's just going to leave, you know, her apartment. She's never going to speak to her friends again. No, she interpreted that as like, go after them and murder them, which I thought was maybe a little far. But
in the motif, you get it. Like, there has to be human sacrifice for,
but it works,
you know, right? And again, to play with the idea of, like, how many people did you kill in Hollywood to get to where you are? 5. I mean, that's what happens here, and that's what's so neat is that look again. Alex Esso's face. That look when it just the light bulb clicks on. Like, oh, I just have to kill all these people. Well, I hate them all anyway, except for maybe Tracy. So that's okay. And I mean, like, and she's not home.
I've gotten this far.
Right. And so she puts on the hoodie, she goes over and she sees I love it. It's the first one she gets is Aaron. We talk about the other actress that's just been giving her hell this whole time for, you know, you going in silver screens and all this stuff. And when she looks at her and she sees her face, and it's one time when, like, the original poster of this movie is amazing. It's her face with all the cuts and all that stuff. And you see, like, I call it like her Fly versus the Exorcist face. And I'm like, man, the makeup job here is tremendous for a movie that was made for nothing.
Oh my God.
Right.
Again, it's hard to watch.
It is. But on the other hand, like, from the artistry point of view, I'm going, how did you do that?
Oh my God. It's incredible.
Yeah. It's great. And she's like, please go to the hospital. And when she cuts that other girl with the knife, I mean, cuts her on the face too. I'm like, oh, it's on now. Like, it is. I mean,
she's no more empathy, no more humanity left. Like, she's ready.
Yeah. And she goes on and she brutalizes her. Right. And then she realizes she's not dead yet. So she suffocates her. That's when I'm like, this is gone full Breaking Bad now. Like, we're just going to choke the dude out.
And it lasted for so long too. And she just
it's uncomfortable.
Like, you think she would take a moment where she'd be like, wait, maybe I should stop. No, she was not stopping. She was so sure of all of this.
I mean, because again, it's threshold.
Honestly, part of it, you're kind of like, okay, yeah. Listen, I value her ambition.
Maybe not.
It's good to have a dream.
Yeah, but when she goes outside to kill Danny,
but I give her credit for how far she's willing to work.
Right. But she goes outside to kill Danny, the director, and she gets that weight, and she just turns his head into just a pile of mush. I mean, I was like, there's a way to do that. There's like Rob Zombie's way, where it just makes you really uncomfortable and like, please stop making me look at that. And then there's this. And it's just enough that you're like, is she really continuing to hit that pulp right there? But you see it, and it's just slinging all over her, the viscera, all that. And she's just like, whatever. Like, and that's when you can tell, like, Sarah is gone. Like, there's no more Sarah. Yeah. And she has completely gone at that point. And that's when we get the whole bit where they've surrounded her, and I don't know what ritual they're doing exactly, where she's on the ground and like in this bubble or something, but it is really unsettling to look at. Like, I don't know if she's melting into the earth.
It's so scary.
Yeah, like that is very strange.
It's amazing. Yeah, and I think this movie is like the reason that Midsommar works, or what a prelude to Midsommar. Like,
yeah,
the cult and having this huge rebirth and this just these violent deaths and weird rituals and all this stuff. Like, I don't think Midsommar would have been possible without this film.
No, like this,
it's just so
the witch,
that scene. Yeah, at the end where she's literally like crawling out of like a body bag, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
It's just insane to watch.
Yeah, I mean,
it gives you that same like just on edge, uncomfortable feeling.
Yeah, and then to smash cut to daylight, and she's like, it's almost like they buried her by the Hollywood sign, and she's overlooking the town, mm-hmm. right? And when her hand comes up out of the ground, I'm like, okay, we've seen this happen. But they did this great thing. They gave her these long, they look like steel fingernails.
Claws.
Right? She's
they play again on Hollywood so well with that. It's beautiful how they do that.
You notice it. That's the thing. But you see her too. And aside from the dirt on her, like, she looks normal again. She's healthy. She looks she's got this great smile on her face. She didn't have any hair on her head. And I'm like,
happier than like she was before.
Right. Like, she's through it now. And they leave her like this whole box of presents, and you're like, that's nice. How about a shower? I mean, because I just crawl out of the dirt, but okay, whatever. But it's not over though. And this is where we really get it. She goes back to her apartment and she just sort of cocoons herself in her bed, because it's all a trap just to get the roommate Tracy to come look at her. And the way she kills her, Corey,
gross.
Is so well. I mean, she's laying there, she didn't have anything on right, and so the roommate is just like, what is going on with her? And then it almost like she seduces her. And I want to ask you, like, she basically like kisses this girl to death by ripping her like tongue out through her own mouth or something. I don't know. There's a lot of blood though, and it's really weird.
It's great. It really reminded me of the scene in Jennifer's Body where like Jennifer and Needy knows she's a demon, but they're like on her bed playing around. And I at first was very confused by this scene, but I think it has to do a lot with, like, again, she's now like the epitome of beauty. Like, she is what we view as the beauty standard. She's, the ingenue in Hollywood. Mm-hmm. And so I think that was sort of the whole reason that they had that kind of weird sexual kiss death, because that's sort of like what she represents now in a way.
Yeah, she's literally looks that kill at this point. And and we should say that the effects that they've got going on are with her. She's got these contacts in, or it's an effect on the after effects.
It looks amazing.
Yeah, those eyes, and it's just hypnotic. And then she sits in the mirror and she's cleaned herself up, and she's, she puts on that wig, and we've seen the vision of this before, but now you're seeing it come to real life. And you're like, Sarah got exactly what she bargained for. They gave her everything she said she wanted, and you see those eyes glow, and
she gave up her entire life, and
and several others to get to this point. But that's the thing, and what you wonder, and you're left wondering with, like, is she now just like this demon incarnate, or is she going to go and become a big star? Like, I almost wanted like a coda to the movie where you see her in lights and all this stuff.
Totally. Well, one thing I wonder is like how, because stardom only lasts for so long, especially when you're a woman, because, aging, that kind of thing. I was like, how long is this going to last for her? She has 10 years left till she's 30. Like, when's that gonna, I don't know. But I think it was such a horrifying ending. She's so pretty and she just looks so good and confident, but they just made it so terrifying to watch. And you're kind of like happy for her, and then you're like, well, good for her, I guess. But it's just so unnerving.
Yeah, it's you realize what she had to go through to get there, and then again, you think about, like, well, what do you have to go through to become famous?
Is it worth it?
Yeah, is it worth it? Mm-hmm. and it's left ambiguous. So again, maybe I'm wrong, and it's better that they leave it that way, because it does leave you on a great cliffhanger, and you wonder like, what would happen in Starry Eyes 2, The Reckoning? But we'll never know, because they'll never do that. Thankfully, no one has done that. I'm surprised.
You never know. They could.
Yeah. You never know. I kind of wonder like if this would ever get revisited again, because it is such a cool story and stuff. But yeah, we're at the end of the movie.
I hope so. I think it needs more attention. If it could maybe be bigger, if more people saw it.
I think especially nowadays too, with just its topicalness, it may be, maybe we're still, it's too raw to go there, but it's definitely one worth seeing, because it just,
I don't think so at all. I think it's perfect. The perfect timing for it to get like a cult following is now.
Well, I think it's definitely gotten that. I think it would be neat if it got more mainstream to it, as more people talk about this, then this is a movie to go to. And, again, if you don't even want to talk about that of it, the movie itself is phenomenal anyway.
The film, like the art of it, is incredible, and it's so wonderful. You watch things like The Shining and you're like, well, Wendy Torrance obviously is an incredible performance, but then you look back at like everything that Shelley had to go through, and it's like, is it worth it? What's really the ending here? And so I think that again was like a really beautiful way of showing just how far actors have to work, and artists in general have to work to get to where they want to be.
Oh yeah. I mean, you watch The Dark Knight and you see Heath Ledger give this, once in a lifetime performance, and realize that, wow, like how many things changed because he didn't survive that.
Because of him.
Yeah. And I mean, but just all the ripple effect of that.
Forever be immortalized because of that. Like he will always be the Joker. I don't think anyone's going to ever be able to beat that. Yeah,
everybody's always going to chase that now. And for years they chased, Jack Nicholson, and nobody got anywhere near that, which is funny because he didn't even care about it. He was just that good. But then Ledger comes along.
He did well.
Yeah, he made it work for himself.
Yeah.
But I mean, then Ledger comes along and just wipes the slate, and it's. I mean, I could talk for days about all the things that changed about Christopher Nolan's life, but and I don't think he'll ever get over it. But it's one of those things that you have to ask yourself, like, was it worth it? And that's the ultimate thing. So was it worth it, Corey, to watch this movie? We're at time to talk about final thoughts, recommendations, and popcorn ratings. So what are yours for Starry Eyes?
All right. This is like one of my all-time favorite movies, mostly because it's so personal to me watching actors struggle, but I'm going to give it an extra large popcorn. It's, I think, so good, so impressive to watch on such a small budget indie film, how far they were willing to take, or how far they were able to take this, and just how raw and incredible the performances are. I think it's amazing.
I'm going to join you. I think this is absolutely extra large. It's one of the best horror movies I've seen in the last 15 years. I mean, it's in the top 5 of new things that have come out. And it, again, such a simple premise, and with no money, and a lot of times they talk about like necessity is the mother of invention. When you don't have a lot of resources, you make do with what you got. And they hit it out of the park with Alex Esso, and it totally works. Everything about this movie just totally works. That's just all there is to it. I mean, it's just a fantastic.
It's exactly what it needs to be.
Yeah, it's a fantastic performance. It's a fleet movie. It goes by fast, and as unsettling and uncomfortable as it is, that's what makes it great. And that's why it's totally worth watching. So extra large on Starry Eyes for me as well. Corey, absolutely been a blast to have you on the show. How can folks follow all of your tremendous work? Yeah, because you have such great stuff. So please tell folks how they can best follow you and all of the work that you're doing.
Thank you. All right. I'm at Gory Corey Horror on Twitter, and I'm pretty much on Twitter 24/7. And then I am at _Gory Corey _ on Instagram. And you can find my podcast, The Scream Teens, anywhere you listen to podcasts on the Anatomy of a Scream podcast network.
Strong recommend on all of that stuff, and go to Corey.
You can read my blog, gorycorey.com.
Yeah, that was going to say, you definitely got to put the blog in, because that is awesome stuff. I'll tell the story now. You got retweeted in my timeline by somebody. And I thought, this is interesting. And so I just started kind of going down the rabbit hole, and I was like, this is awesome. She really has a great voice. And like, you know, you're writing and all this. And I was like, I'm digging this. And then I heard you on Screen Teens, and I heard you on a couple of shows. I was like, okay, I got to get Corey on Film Strip, because this is just way too cool. And we didn't talk about it at the beginning, but you tweeted something about Starry Eyes. And I was like, that's it. That's the end. Cause I'm like, what can I ask this person to review? Because Corey, you were by far the youngest guest we've ever had on this show. And that's no slight at all. That is a distinction.
I'm so honored.
But you are, you really bring the bona fides for sure. And are definitely someone to watch and a great follow. And I definitely, folks, recommend you check out Corey's show and her writing and all the cool stuff she's doing with Fangoria and everything else, because it is fun to keep up with, particularly if you're into horror movies, but just movies in general. So always fun. So thanks again for being here, Corey. Folks, you can follow the show's social media at Film Strip Pod on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. There you'll find announcements of upcoming shows and everything else we've got going on. You'll find a link to our Letterboxd page if you want to look through our incredible archives, 300 plus now, and go to filmstrippodcast.com. You'll link to our Anchor FM distribution site, and we're on the podcast platform of your choice, Apple, Spotify, Google, all that stuff. Please share the show if you can. Leave us a positive review. Helps other people find the podcast. We really appreciate it. So for Corey, I'm Jay. Thank you for listening to Film Strip.
Thank you for listening to Film Strip. You can find more episodes on our website, filmstrippodcast.com. The Film Strip theme music is produced and performed by Frozen Lake 121. All content used or discussed in these podcast episodes is the property of the respective owners and used under the Fair Use Act, Section 504, C2, Title 17.